Now let us discuss chapter 54, that is the mechanics of breathing. So in this chapter, first we need to talk about the muscles that cause lung expansion and contraction, that is the mechanics of pulmonary ventilation. So the lungs can be expanded and contracted in two ways. One is by the upward and downward movement of the diaphragm, okay, to lengthen or shorten the chest cavity, and then by elevation or depression of the ribs to increase and decrease the anteroposterior diameter of the chest cavity. So normal quiet breathing is accomplished almost entirely by the movement of the diaphragm itself. So contraction of the diaphragm pulls the lower surfaces of the lungs downward, and then during expiration the elastic recoil itself is enough to cause expulsion of the air, causing expiration. Okay, elastic recoil itself causes the diaphragm to move upwards. During heavy breathing, however, the elastic forces are not powerful to cause the necessary rapid expiration. So extra force is required for expiration, and this is achieved by the contraction of the abdominal muscles. Okay. So, and the second method other than the diaphragm is by using the rib cage. So raising the rib cage expands the lungs, because in the natural resting position the ribs, as you can see here, they slant downward. Okay, so when the ribs are elevated, it increases the anteroposterior diameter. Okay, increase in volume causes decrease in pressure, and the atmospheric pressure is higher compared to the intrathoracic pressure, so air comes in. Okay, so that is what happens. So when the rib cage is elevated, however, the ribs project almost directly forward, so the sternum also moves forward away from the spine, making the AP thickness of the chest, anteroposterior thickness, about 20% greater during maximum inspiration than during expiration. Okay, so the most important muscles that raise the rib cage are the external intercostal muscles and also the muscles with S, that is serratus anterior, sternocleidomastoid, and the scaleni muscles, and also the alae nasi, which cause flaring of the nostrils. The muscles that cause expiration are the abdominal recti and also the internal intercostals. Okay, so that is it, and we already know about the direction of the fibers of external and intercostal muscles from anatomy. Now let us talk about the pressures that cause the movement of air in and out of the lungs. So we mainly have pleural pressure. Okay, pleural pressure, the normal pleural pressure at the beginning of inspiration is about -5 centimeters of H2O. Okay, so the pleural pressure is the fluid of the pressure of the fluid within the thin space in between the lung pleura and the chest wall pleura, that is the parietal and the visceral pleura. Okay, so this -5 centimeters normal pleural pressure is the amount of suction that is required to hold the lungs open to their resting level. Okay, during normal inspiration -5, it becomes more negative and it becomes -7.5, and this causes an inspiration of 500 ml of tidal volume, that is increase in lung volume during inspiration. Okay, within the 2 seconds that are required for inspiration. Now about alveolar pressure. So alveolar pressure, it is almost 0 centimeters of H2O. Okay, when the glottis is open and no air is flowing into or out of the lungs. Okay, to cause inward flow of air, the alveoli must have a subatmospheric pressure. Okay, that means it must fall to -1 centimeters of H2O. Then this slight negative pressure is enough to pull 500 ml of air into the lungs in the 2 seconds that are required for normal inspiration. During expiration, the alveolar pressure becomes +1 centimeters of H2O, which forces the 500 ml out again in the 2 to 3 seconds that are required for expiration. So these are the changes in the pleural pressure and in the alveolar pressure. Okay, pleural pressure becomes from -5 to -7.5, and alveolar pressure becomes from -1 to +1. And then this is the flow chart of inspiration and expiration. Okay, so what the diaphragm does and how the intrapleural pressure becomes more negative and alveolar pressure decreases below atmospheric pressure to cause air to flow in, and the exact reverse thing. And now when we talk about this graph, okay, so what happens is your pleural pressure first, it was -5, okay, at the beginning of inspiration, and then it becomes -7.5, okay, and again it becomes -5 in expiration. Similarly, as the pleural pressure is becoming more negative, your alveoli, what happens is they increase in volume, that is the alveolar pressure also decreases. Okay, like this it decreases and then it increases again. Okay, and this difference in the alveolar pressure and in the pleural pressure is called the transpulmonary pressure, And as you can see here, when alveolar pressure decreases, the alveolar volume increases during inspiration and it decreases during expiration. Okay, and this is about the transpulmonary pressure. Transpulmonary pressure is a measure of the elastic forces in the lungs that tend to collapse the lung at any instant of respiration. This is also called the recoil pressure. Okay, so what is the compliance? Okay, so the compliance of both lungs is equal to the change in the volume of the lung per unit change in transpulmonary pressure. Okay, it refers to the expandability or expandability of the lungs. If your lungs are expanding more, it means they are more compliant. Okay, this is equal to delta V by P equal to 200 ml of air per centimeter of H2O. Okay, so this is the compliance diagram of the lungs, the compliance diagram. So as you can see here, the volume V, delta V by P is the formula. So V on the y-axis and P on the x-axis, pleural pressure. So there are two curves in the compliance diagram. You have inspiratory curve and expiratory curve. So as you keep increasing the pressure, your volume during inspiration, it only as you keep increasing the pressure more negatively, then your volume first increases at a lesser extent, then it starts increasing rapidly for small changes in the pressure. Okay, the opposite in the case of expiration. So the inspiratory and expiratory compliance curves are different from each other. And then compliance mainly depends on two forces. Okay, that is the elastic forces of the lung tissue and elastic forces caused by surface tension. Elastic forces of the lung tissue are because of elastin and collagen fibers, and they are interwoven among the lung parenchyma. So in the deflated lungs, so the fibers are kinky. Okay, and they are contracted. When the lungs expand, the fibers become stretched and unkinked, thereby they elongate and exert even more elastic force. Okay, and when we talk about surface tension forces, surface tension is something that tries to collapse your lung. Okay, so surface tension, it tries to collapse your lung, it decreases the expandability, hence it decreases the compliance of the lung. Okay, so that is why when you take a lung and when you fill it with saline, okay, so you don't have surface tension. So that is why as you don't have something that collapses your lung is easily expandable. So that is why your compliance increases, whereas in an air filled lung, your compliance, it is less than that of a saline filled lung. So one can conclude that the transpleural pressures required to expand air filled lungs equal to 3 times those required to expand saline filled lungs, because see, surface tension only exists when there is an air water interface, because water molecules, they tend to attract each other. Okay, so that is why water is lining the alveoli, so it tends to attract each other, the alveoli collapse, whereas when there is an already saline filled lung, there is water everywhere. Okay, so that is why your expandability increases, surface tension is almost negligible. What is the regional variation of compliance? The basal regions are gravity dependent. Okay, as you can imagine, all the weight it goes on to that, so they receive more ventilation as compared to the upper regions of the lungs, so they have less negative intrapleural pressure. Okay, the negative intrapleural pressure at the base does not need to additionally inflate the alveoli there. Okay, because of gravity, already the air is coming to the basal region. So the alveoli in the upper regions are already filled with air and less compliant compared to those in the dependent regions. Okay, in the upper regions, the alveoli are less compliant. Okay, and then this is because, see, there is less negative intrapleural pressure in the basal regions. So that is why the upper region alveoli have larger volumes as compared to those in the basal and more dependent regions, because the intrapleural pressure is required to stretch your alveoli. That is less in the basal region. So in the apical regions, your alveoli are more expanded and they are less compliant. So what about surface tension? So surface tension, as I said, water molecules, they tend to attract each other in the liquid phase rather than in the gaseous phase. Okay, and the net effect is to cause an elastic contractile force of the entire lungs, which is called surface tension elastic force. So surfactant is a surface active agent in water. It is secreted by type 2 alveolar epithelial cells, which constitute about 10% of the surface area of the alveoli. So the composition of the surfactant is DPPC, majority of it, that is dipalmitoyl phosphatidylcholine, which is a phospholipid. You also have surface apoproteins and calcium ions. Okay, and they perform this function by they not dissolving uniformly in the fluid lining the alveolar surface. So a part of the molecule dissolves while the remainder spreads over the surface of the water in the alveoli, and this surface has from 1/12 to 1/2 of the surface tension of the pure water surface. So pure water surface tension is equal to 72 dynes per centimeter. So fluid that water normally lining the alveoli without any surfactant has about 50 dynes per centimeter, and with surfactant the surface tension is about 5 to 30 dynes per centimeter. So with surfactant your surface tension is reduced. Okay, so you can see all this. And then pressure in the occluded alveoli caused by surface tension. So if the air passages leading from the alveoli are blocked, surface tension in the alveoli tends to collapse the alveoli. This collapse creates a positive pressure in the alveoli attempting to push the air out. Okay, so we know from Laplace law that P is equal to 2T by R. So when the radius is already less, okay, that means your pressure is increasing. So when the pressure increases, air flows from high pressure to low pressure. So the collapsed alveoli wants to collapse more. Okay, so for the that is what is here. And then there is mention about effect of alveolar radius on the pressure caused by surface tension. And then pathophysiology of respiratory distress syndrome. That is why, see, in fetuses, what happens is they have the radius of the alveoli are lesser than that of an adult person. They are about 1/4 that of an adult. And also surfactant synthesis does not normally begin till 6th and 7th months of gestation. Surfactant S for 6 and 7, okay, months of gestation, and some cases even later. So premature babies, the alveoli they tend to collapse because of surface tension forces, as the proper quantity of surfactant is not there, and this causes respiratory distress syndrome of the newborn. So there should be positive pressure breathing, otherwise it could be fatal. And then the effect of thoracic cage on lung expansibility, that is the compliance of the thorax and lungs together. When the thorax and lungs are together, the compliance is more. If you take out the lung from the thorax and try to inflate it, it takes twice as much pressure to inflate the same lungs after removal from the chest cage. Okay, what about the work of breathing? So as we already said, in normal quiet breathing, inspiration is an active process. So work is only done for inspiration but not for expiration. So the work of inspiration can be divided into 3 fractions, that is compliance work, that is the work that is required to expand the lungs and the chest, and then you have the tissue resistance work to overcome the viscosity of the lung and chest wall, and also to overcome airway resistance there is airway resistance work. Okay, and then you can see this diagram. Okay, and you also have conditions in which there is increased and decreased compliance of the lungs. And finally, when we get to this, we need to talk about 2 things, that is minute respiratory volume. So that is it is a total amount of new air that is moved into the respiratory passages each minute, and it is equal to the tidal volume into the respiratory rate per minute. So tidal volume is 500 ml and normal respiratory rate is about 12 breaths per minute. So 500 into 12, it gives us 6 liters per minute respiratory volume. So what is alveolar ventilation? So the rate at which new air reaches the alveoli, the alveolar sacs, the ducts and the respiratory bronchioles is called alveolar ventilation. Okay, and then dead space. See, some of the air a person breathes, it never reaches the gas exchange areas but simply fills the respiratory passages where gas exchange does not occur. This air is called the dead space air because it is not useful for gas exchange. Okay, so the dead space air is very disadvantageous for removing the expiratory gases from the lungs because the dead space air is expired first. So how do we calculate the dead space volume? See, what you do is you make a subject inhale, take a deep breath of 100% oxygen which fills the entire dead space with pure oxygen. Okay, and in the alveoli you have a small amount of nitrogen content in the air. So when a person rapidly expires, then So first all your dead space regions having pure oxygen, they are expelled out, and then slowly the nitrogen content in your alveolar air starts coming out, and you can see this graph. Okay, you make a person inhale pure oxygen, and then you make him expire, and the nitrogen concentration keeps increasing because then you start breathing out the alveolar air also. And before you start breathing out the alveolar air, the respiratory passageway air and all that containing pure O2, it is shown in the gray region here, that is expelled out. So you can calculate the dead space air by this formula, that is the area, the gray area. Okay, gray area containing only oxygen present in the dead space. So gray area by gray area plus pink area into the VE. Okay, VE is the total volume of expired air. So then that gives us an equation of 30 by 30 plus 70 into 500, which gives us 150 ml of dead space volume. So normal is 150 ml. And the anatomical versus physiological dead space. Anatomical dead space, it measures the volume of the space of the respiratory system other than the alveoli. Okay, whereas in physiological dead space, sometimes you have alveoli that are normally in a collapsed state, or they have poor blood flow, so they cannot contribute to gas exchange. So they also add up to physiological dead space. Normally anatomical and physiological dead spaces are nearly equal, but in case there is any abnormal pathology, the physiological dead space may increase, and this indicates any respiratory pathology. Okay, thank you.